The Galactic Council chamber hummed with the nervous energy of 12 different species, their various breathing apparatus and environmental suits creating a symphony of mechanical sounds. Ambassador Zix Thala of the Crystalline Hegemony stood at the center podium, her translucent body flickering with distress patterns that even the most basic universal translator could interpret as panic. "Esteemed colleagues," she began, her voice carrying the harmonic undertones that her species used for emphasis. "The situation in the outer spiral has deteriorated beyond our most pessimistic projections. The Devourer swarm has consumed 17 systems in the past rotation cycle alone." A collective shudder rippled through the assembled representatives. The Devourers were a nightmare made manifest, a hive-minded species that consumed entire biospheres, leaving nothing but hollow husks of dead worlds in their wake. They had appeared from the galactic void 3 cycles ago, and every attempt to communicate, negotiate, or reason with them had ended in the complete annihilation of the diplomatic vessels. Council Leader Morgeth, a towering representative of the gentle giants of Kepler 442b, leaned forward with concern. "What of the combined fleets? Surely our unified military response has slowed their advance." The holographic display behind Zix Thala shifted to show the tactical overview. Red markers indicated consumed systems spreading like a plague across the spiral arm. Blue markers showed the positions of the combined Galactic Defense Fleet, pitifully few and constantly retreating. "Fleet Admiral Kretak reports that conventional warfare is proving inadequate," Zix Thala admitted, her crystalline form dimming with shame. "The Devourers adapt to our weapon systems within hours of first contact. Our energy shields are useless against their bioacid projectiles. Our quantum torpedoes barely scratch their living ships." Representative Quill of the Avian Confederacy ruffled his iridescent feathers in agitation. "Then what do you propose? We cannot simply abandon entire sectors to these monsters." "There is one possibility," Zix Thala said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "The ancient protocols." The chamber fell silent except for the ambient life support systems. Even the youngest members of the council knew of the ancient protocols, emergency measures established eons ago by the founding species of the galactic community. They were meant to be used only in the most desperate circumstances, when the very survival of galactic civilization hung in the balance. Morgeth's massive hands gripped the arms of his specially reinforced chair. "You speak of summoning the Deathworlders." It wasn't a question. Every species in the galaxy had heard whispers of the Deathworld classification system, planets so hostile to life that they bred creatures of unimaginable resilience and ferocity. Most civilized species had evolved on gentle garden worlds, where cooperation and intellect were the keys to survival. But scattered throughout the galaxy were worlds that tested their inhabitants in ways that defied comprehension. The database contains references to several species that might possess the necessary characteristics, Zix Thala continued, calling up a new display. The Catharan battle mollusks of Rigel 7, masters of void warfare. The Silicon berserkers of Wolf 359, who fight with weapons made from their own crystallized blood. The hive hunters of Proxima Centauri, whose entire evolutionary history revolves around combating swarm intelligences. But it was the final entry that caught everyone's attention. A small blue-green world in an unremarkable spiral arm, listed simply as Sol 3 Terra. What manner of creatures inhabit this Terra? Asked Counselor Vex, her insectoid compound eyes reflecting the holographic display. Zix Thala accessed the ancient files, her expression growing more disturbed with each passing moment. The dominant species calls itself human. According to these records, their homeworld is a Class 12 death world. A collective gasp echoed through the chamber. Class 12 was theoretical. No known species had ever been confirmed to survive on a world rated higher than Class 8. "Impossible," breathed Representative Quill. "No carbon-based life could evolve on such a hostile environment." "The records indicate otherwise," Zixthala replied, her voice trembling. "Their world experiences temperature variations that would kill most of our species in minutes. Massive storms that can level entire cities, seismic activity that regularly reshapes continents. And yet, they thrive." She brought up additional data that made even the hardiest council members uncomfortable. "They have survived multiple extinction-level events, ice ages that lasted millennia, asteroid impacts that sterilized much of their surface. They have fought wars using weapons that harness the power of stellar fusion. They have split the atom and turned it into a tool of unimaginable destruction." "And you believe these humans would aid us?" Morgeth asked skeptically. "The ancient protocols include provisions for mutual defense," Zixthala explained. "Any species that accepts the call becomes a provisional member of the galactic community, with all the rights and protections that entails. And according to these records, humans have a peculiar trait that might serve our purposes." She paused, checking the translation matrices to ensure accuracy. "They have an instinctive response to protect those they perceive as innocent or helpless. Their history is filled with examples of individuals sacrificing themselves to save strangers, even members of other species. They call it heroism." The concept was alien to most of the council. In their civilized societies, self-preservation was paramount. Sacrifice for the greater good was something that happened only after careful calculation and committee approval. "The database also contains warnings," Zixthala continued reluctantly. "Humans are described as persistent predators with pack-bonding instincts and extreme territorial behavior. They have a concept they call righteous fury that appears to override their normal survival instincts when they perceive an injustice." "They sound dangerous," observed Vex with a shudder. "Yes," Zixthala agreed. "But perhaps that is what we need. Our enemies are also dangerous." The debate that followed lasted hours. Some council members argued that summoning unknown Deathworlders was too risky. They might prove as dangerous as the Devourers themselves. Others pointed out that they were already facing extinction. What was one more threat compared to certain annihilation? Finally, Morgeth called for a vote. The motion to activate the ancient protocols and send a distress call to Sol 3 passed by a single vote, his own. The quantum communication array was housed in a heavily shielded facility on the neutral station of Harmony Prime. As Zixthala approached the ancient console, she couldn't help but notice how different the technology looked from modern galactic standard. The ancients had built their emergency systems to last, using methods that seemed crude but unbreakably robust. The distress beacon would broadcast on frequencies that supposedly reached across the galaxy instantaneously, carrying a simple message in the ancient mathematical language that all spacefaring species were supposed to understand. Her crystalline fingers hesitated over the activation controls. Once she sent this signal, there would be no taking it back. Somewhere in the distant Sol system, creatures that had evolved on a world of nightmares would receive a call for help from strangers they had never met. The question was, would they answer? And if they did, would the council live to regret it? Taking what her species approximated as a deep breath, Zixthala activated the beacon. The message began its journey across the void, carrying with it the hopes and fears of an entire galactic civilization. Ancient protocols activated. Galactic civilization faces extinction-level threat. Request immediate military assistance, coordinates and tactical data included. Time is running out. In the depths of space, quantum fluctuations carried the message toward a small yellow star, where a species of apex predators had recently begun to wonder if they were alone in the universe. They were about to discover that they most definitely were not. and the galaxy was about to learn what happened when someone threatened those under human protection. The beacon pulsed once more and fell silent, leaving nothing but the quiet hum of machinery and the weight of consequences yet to come. Zixthala stared at the console, wondering if she had just saved galactic civilization or doomed it to a fate worse than the Devourers could ever inflict. Time would tell, but time was the one thing they didn't have. Admiral Sarah Chen was enjoying her first cup of coffee in 36 hours when the universe decided to get interesting. The bridge of the UES Indomitable was running on skeleton crew during the night shift, monitoring routine patrol patterns in the outer Sol system, when Lieutenant Torres suddenly sat up straight at his communications station. "Admiral, I'm picking up something on the deep space arrays. Well, I've never seen anything like it." Chen set down her mug and moved to Torres's station. After 15 years commanding humanity's most advanced exploration vessels, she had learned to pay attention when her communications officer sounded confused. "What are we looking at, Lieutenant?" "It's some kind of quantum transmission, but the encoding is completely alien. The pattern recognition software is having a field day trying to decode it. And Admiral?" Torres looked up at her with wide eyes. "This signal is coming from outside the galaxy." Every head on the bridge turned toward them. Humanity had been reaching for the stars for decades, always hoping to find some sign that they weren't alone in the universe. Now it seemed the universe had found them first. "Patch it through to the linguistics AI," Chen ordered, "and wake up the entire xenolinguistics department. I want every expert we have working on this." It took 6 hours to crack the mathematical basis of the message. When Dr. Elizabeth Reeves finally emerged from the linguistics lab, her face was pale with disbelief. "Admiral, you need to hear this," she said, her voice barely steady. "The message is a distress call. There's an entire galactic civilization out there, and they're under attack by something called a Devourer swarm. They're requesting military assistance under something called the Ancient Protocols." Chen felt her pulse quicken. "Are you certain about the translation?" "As certain as we can be with an alien language we decoded 6 hours ago," Reeves replied. "But Admiral, there's more. The message includes tactical data about their attackers, and if these readings are accurate, we're looking at a species that consumes entire star systems. They've already destroyed 17 inhabited worlds." The implications hit Chen like a physical blow. Somewhere out in the galactic spiral, billions of intelligent beings were facing extinction, and they had sent a desperate plea for help to a species they had never met, on a world they probably couldn't even pronounce. "What does the message say about these ancient protocols?" Chen asked. Dr. Reeves consulted her tablet. "It appears to be some kind of mutual defense pact. Any species that responds to a protocol activation becomes a provisional member of something called the Galactic Community. They're offering us technology, resources, and formal recognition in exchange for military aid." "And what exactly do they expect us to do against enemies that can destroy entire star systems?" "That's the interesting part," Reeves continued. "The message specifically mentions that they're looking for what they call Deathworlders, species that evolved on hostile planets. According to their classification system, Earth is rated as a Class 12 Deathworld." Chen raised an eyebrow. "Should I be insulted that they think we live on a hostile planet?" "Admiral," Reeves said quietly, "Class 12 is apparently the highest rating on their scale. Most galactic species evolved on worlds they classify as Class 2 or 3. They seem to think that our evolutionary background makes us uniquely suited to combat these devourers." The next 12 hours were a whirlwind of activity. The message was forwarded to Earth Command, where emergency sessions of the United Earth Council began immediately. Military strategists pored over the tactical data, xenobiologists studied the limited information about galactic species, and philosophers debated the ethics of involving humanity in an alien war. But Admiral Chen knew what the decision would be long before the official orders arrived. She had spent enough time with humans to understand their fundamental nature. When someone sent a distress call, especially one that mentioned innocent civilians under attack, humans didn't debate the response. They acted. The orders came through 18 hours after the initial contact. Operation Lighthouse is authorized. Deploy all available expeditionary forces to rendezvous coordinates. Priority Alpha. Godspeed. Chen smiled grimly as she read the orders. Operation Lighthouse. Someone in Earth Command had a sense of irony. Humanity was about to become a beacon of hope for an entire galaxy that had never heard of them. All stations, this is Admiral Chen, she announced over the ship's intercom. Prepare for immediate departure. We're going to make first contact, and we're going in armed for bear. What the aliens couldn't have known, what no amount of ancient databases could have told them, was that they had sent their distress call during the largest peacetime military exercise in human history. The Outer Sol naval maneuvers had gathered nearly every combat-capable vessel in the human fleet for training operations. Destroyers, cruisers, carriers, and the massive new Dreadnought-class ships that represented the pinnacle of human military engineering. 347 warships, carrying the most destructive weapons humanity had ever devised. As Admiral Chen's fleet began the quantum jump sequence toward the galactic core, she couldn't help but wonder what these peaceful galactic species would think when they realized what they had summoned. The message had requested military assistance. They were about to get it in a form that no civilized species could have imagined. Meanwhile, in the Galactic Council chambers, Zixathala waited anxiously for any response to their desperate plea. The Devourers had consumed 3 more systems since the message was sent. The combined fleets were in full retreat, and some counselors were already talking about evacuating the core worlds. Perhaps no one received the signal, suggested Representative Quill, his feathers drooping with despair. The Sol system is very far from the galactic core. Or perhaps these humans are extinct, added Counselor Vex. The database entries are very old. Their world could be lifeless by now. But Morgeth was studying the quantum communication logs with growing excitement. No, look here. The beacon registered a response acknowledgement. Something in the Sol system received our message and confirmed understanding. That doesn't mean they're coming, Zixathala pointed out, though hope flickered in her crystalline form. Even if they understood, they might have decided not to involve themselves in our conflict. The first indication that something unprecedented was happening came from the deep space monitoring stations. Long-range sensors began detecting quantum wake signatures moving through hyperspace toward the galactic core at speeds that should have been impossible for ships of any significant size. Contact Admiral Kretak, Morgeth ordered. Tell him to position his forces near the Helix Nebula staging area. If the humans are coming, that's where they'll emerge from hyperspace. Admiral Kretak was a veteran of 17 major campaigns and thought he had seen everything the galaxy could offer in terms of military technology. He commanded a fleet of 800 vessels representing the finest warships that 12 different species could produce. When his sensors officer reported massive hyperspace disturbances approaching their position, he expected to see perhaps a dozen primitive ships limping through space on crude propulsion systems. What emerged from the quantum fold made him question everything he thought he knew about warfare. The human fleet materialized in perfect formation, hundreds of vessels moving with mechanical precision that spoke of advanced artificial intelligence and communication systems beyond galactic standard. But it was the ships themselves that made Kretak's tactical displays scream warnings. These weren't the graceful, curved vessels preferred by most galactic species. These were angular, aggressive designs that looked like they had been built for one purpose: warfare. Armor plating that seemed to absorb sensor scans. Weapon emplacements that his computer couldn't even categorize, and power readings that suggested reactors operating on principles his science officers couldn't identify. "By the 7 stars," whispered his communications officer. Sir, the lead vessel is attempting to contact us, but their transmission protocols? They're using quantum encryption methods that shouldn't be possible. Admiral Chen's voice crackled across the communication channel, translated by systems that were already adapting to galactic standard languages with frightening efficiency. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Expeditionary Force, responding to the Ancient Protocol activation. We received your distress call and are prepared to render assistance. Please transmit current tactical situation and enemy positions. The matter-of-fact tone somehow made it even more impressive. These humans had traveled across the galaxy in response to a plea from strangers, bringing with them a fleet that made even the combined forces of galactic civilization look primitive by comparison, and they were asking for target coordinates. Kretak found his voice after several moments of stunned silence. Admiral Chen, this is Fleet Admiral Kretak of the Galactic Defense Force. We are grateful for your response, but I must warn you, the Devourer swarm has proven immune to all conventional weapons. Perhaps it would be better if your forces remained here while we... Admiral Kretak. Chen's voice cut through his diplomatic hedging with the tone of someone accustomed to making life-and-death decisions in seconds, not hours. With respect, we didn't come this far to sit on the sidelines. My species has a saying, the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. We're here to do something. In the background of the transmission, Kretak could hear other voices speaking in rapid human languages, coordinating movements and preparing weapons systems. The efficiency was breathtaking. Now, Admiral Chen continued, what can you tell us about these devourers that your databases might have missed? How do they fight? How do they think? And most importantly, how do we kill them? The directness of the question sent a chill through the galactic officers. Most civilized species approached warfare as a last resort, a tragic necessity that required extensive deliberation and careful consideration of alternatives. These humans spoke of killing their enemies with the same tone they might use to discuss lunch plans. And somehow, for the first time since the Devourer swarm had appeared, Admiral Kretak found himself believing that perhaps the galaxy might survive after all. Admiral Chen, he said, his voice steady for the first time in weeks. Let me tell you about the greatest threat our civilization has ever faced, and then we'll find out what happens when it encounters humanity. The Kepler 438 system had been beautiful once. Admiral Chen studied the tactical display showing what remained after the Devourer swarm had finished feeding. Where once a thriving civilization of crystal-based lifeforms had built floating cities in the upper atmosphere of a gas giant, now only hollow husks drifted through space like cosmic tombstones. Estimated population before the attack? She asked quietly. 4.7 billion, Admiral Kretak replied from the joint command bridge they had established on his flagship. The Luminar were known throughout the galaxy for their mathematical innovations. They had developed new forms of quantum computing that could have advanced our civilization by centuries. Chen nodded grimly. In the 3 days since the human fleet had arrived, she had been absorbing everything the galactic databases could tell her about the Devourer swarm. What she had learned made her ancestors' worst nightmares look like children's bedtime stories. The Devourers were a hive-minded species that consumed not just the biomass of conquered worlds, but their very essence. They didn't just kill civilizations. They devoured their history, their culture, their potential. Every victory made them stronger, adding the absorbed knowledge and biological adaptations of their victims to their collective consciousness. Contact from the advanced scouts, reported Lieutenant Torres from his position at the Enhanced Communications Array. They've located the main swarm fleet. It's substantial. The holographic display shifted to show long-range sensor readings from the human reconnaissance ships. Even the galactic officers, who had been fighting this enemy for months, gasped at the size of the Devourer formation. "By the 7 moons!" breathed Kretak's tactical officer. "There must be 10,000 bioships in that swarm." Chen studied the formation with the calculating gaze of someone who had spent her career turning impossible odds into victory. The Devourer vessels were unlike anything in galactic civilization, living ships that grew rather than being built, connected by psychic links that allowed them to operate as a single organism. They absorbed energy weapons, adapted to kinetic attacks within hours, and their acid-spewing bioweapons could eat through the strongest armor alloys known to science. "Admiral," said Dr. Marcus Webb, the human fleet's xenobiologist, "I've completed my analysis of the Devourer biological samples. Their adaptation mechanisms are incredibly sophisticated, but they have one critical weakness." "Which is?" Chen asked. "They've never encountered anything like human military doctrine," Webb explained. "Every species they've fought so far has used essentially the same approach: energy weapons, quantum torpedoes, defensive formations designed to minimize casualties. The Devourers have adapted to expect predictable civilized warfare." Chen smiled coldly. "And humans aren't particularly civilized when someone threatens innocent people." "Incoming transmission from the swarm," Torres announced suddenly. They're trying to communicate." The main display filled with an image that made even the battle-hardened humans uncomfortable. The Devourer spokesperson was a writhing mass of tentacles and sensory organs, its form shifting constantly as absorbed genetic material struggled for expression. When it spoke, the voice was a harmony of thousands of different species, the final words of every civilization it had consumed. "Unknown vessels," the creature hissed, its words translated by systems that struggled with the linguistic chaos. "You protect the weak. You fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. This is inefficient. Join us. Become part of something greater. Your biological distinctiveness will add to our perfection." Admiral Chen stepped forward, her response broadcast across all channels so that every ship in both fleets could hear her words. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Expeditionary Force. I speak for humanity and our new allies in the galactic community. Your offer is declined. Surrender now, and we'll make this quick." The Devourer's form pulsed with what might have been amusement. "You are few. We are multitude. We have consumed civilizations that spanned star systems. What can one primitive species from an isolated world hope to accomplish?" Chen's smile was sharp enough to cut vacuum. "You're about to find out what happens when you pick a fight with a species that considers warfare an art form." The first wave of Devourer bioships came in fast, using their traditional swarming tactics to overwhelm enemy formations through sheer numbers. They expected the humans to fall back, to form defensive lines and try to minimize their losses while calling for reinforcements. Instead, the human fleet did something that violated every principle of civilized warfare. They attacked. Not a careful, measured advance designed to probe enemy weaknesses. Not a defensive action meant to buy time for evacuation. A full-scale, coordinated assault that threw every weapon system they possessed directly into the teeth of the Devourer formation. The first Devourer bioships to encounter human railguns discovered that their adaptive armor worked very well against energy weapons, but had no idea how to handle tungsten penetrators moving at a significant fraction of light speed. The projectiles punched through their hulls like bullets through tissue paper, leaving catastrophic wounds that their healing factors couldn't repair fast enough. "Their kinetic weapons operate on principles we've never encountered," the Devourer hive mind screamed across psychic channels. "How do they accelerate matter to such velocities?" But that was only the beginning. The human doctrine of overwhelming firepower meant that every ship carried weapon systems that seemed designed by a species with no concept of overkill. Plasma cannons that operated at temperatures found in stellar cores. Missile systems that could deliver nuclear warheads with targeting accuracy measured in millimeters. And for close-range work, particle beam weapons that literally disintegrated matter at the atomic level. The Devourers had adapted to civilized warfare. They had no defense against what humans called Tuesday afternoon. Admiral Kretok watched in stunned amazement as human ships performed maneuvers that should have been impossible. Instead of maintaining safe distances and firing from maximum range like any sane species, they closed to point-blank range and engaged in what could only be described as naval knife fighting. "How are they surviving this?" his tactical officer whispered as a human destroyer passed within 50 meters of a Devourer bioship, both vessels exchanging fire at distances where any mistake would be instantly fatal. "They're not trying to survive," Kretok realized. "They're trying to win." The concept was so alien that it took him several moments to process. Every other species approached warfare as a necessary evil to be endured with minimal losses. Humans approached it as a problem to be solved with maximum violence applied as efficiently as possible. The turning point came when the Devourers tried to adapt to human weapons. Their bioships began developing armor configurations specifically designed to deflect railgun rounds. Within hours, their hulls had evolved reactive plating that could absorb kinetic impacts, so the humans switched to weapons the Devourers had never seen before. "Contact Admiral Chen," ordered Captain Rodriguez from the UES Retribution. "Request permission to deploy exotic matter warheads." "Granted," came the immediate response. "Light them up." The exotic matter weapons were humanity's newest and most terrifying innovation, devices that temporarily altered the fundamental constants of physics in localized areas. Gravity, electromagnetic force, and nuclear binding energy could be manipulated to create effects that no biological organism could possibly adapt to. Devourer bioships found themselves crushed by gravitational fields that increased by orders of magnitude in seconds. Others had their molecular bonds destabilized, causing them to literally fall apart at the atomic level. Still others were caught in electromagnetic pulses that induced currents powerful enough to cook them from the inside. "Impossible!" the Devourer hive mind screamed. "No species can manipulate fundamental forces. This violates natural law." Admiral Chen's response came through on open channels, her voice carrying the grim satisfaction of someone watching a bully get exactly what they deserved. "Welcome to human natural law. We don't adapt to the universe. We make the universe adapt to us." The battle that followed wasn't really a battle at all. It was an education in the difference between a species that had evolved to survive on a gentle garden world and one that had clawed its way to the top of the food chain on a planet that actively tried to kill everything on it. The Devourers had absorbed the knowledge of thousands of civilizations, but none of those civilizations had ever needed to develop weapons capable of stopping creatures that could regenerate from almost any injury, adapt to any environment, and survive in conditions that would kill most carbon-based life in seconds. Humans had been dealing with exactly those problems for millions of years. They called them Earth's ecosystem. The final Devourer ship went down 3 hours after the first shots were fired. As the bioship's death scream echoed across psychic frequencies, Admiral Chen stood on her bridge and contemplated the debris field that stretched across half the solar system. "Status report," she ordered. "Minimal casualties," Torres reported. "The medical bay reports 17 injured, none critical. Ship damage is within acceptable parameters." "And the Devourers?" "Complete tactical elimination confirmed. No surviving vessels detected." The silence that followed was broken by Admiral Kretok's voice over the communication channel. "Admiral Chen, in 3 hours, you accomplished what our combined fleets could not manage in months. How?" Chen considered the question seriously. How could she explain that humans had spent their entire evolutionary history as pursuit predators, capable of chasing prey until it collapsed from exhaustion? How could she describe a species that had survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, and supervolcanic eruptions not through adaptation, but through stubborn refusal to give up? How could she make them understand that humans didn't see impossible odds as a reason to surrender, but as a challenge to overcome? "Admiral Kretok," she finally said, "we come from a world that tried to kill us every day for 4 billion years. Everything on Earth, the weather, the geology, the other life forms, taught us that the universe doesn't care about fairness or survival. It only cares about strength and the will to use it." She paused, looking out at the stars that suddenly seemed a little bit brighter. The Devourers made one critical mistake. They assumed that because we came from a Class 12 death world, we would be satisfied with just surviving. They never considered that we might have learned how to thrive. In the weeks that followed, as the galactic civilizations began the long process of rebuilding what the Devourers had destroyed, humanity found itself in an unprecedented position. They were not just members of the galactic community, they were its unofficial protectors. Other species began to understand why the ancient databases had classified Earth as they had. It wasn't just that their world was dangerous. It was that their world had created something that no other planet in the galaxy had managed to produce, a species that looked at an impossible situation and asked not, "How do we survive this?" but, "How do we win?" The Galactic Council offered humanity technology, resources, and formal recognition. In return, they asked for only one thing: a promise that if any civilization ever sent out a distress call again, humanity would answer. Admiral Chen's response was immediate and absolute. "When someone calls for help, we come running. That's not negotiable. It's just who we are." And across the galaxy, countless species slept a little easier, knowing that somewhere in the outer spiral, a species of Deathworlders stood ready to remind the universe that evil should always fear the consequences of its actions. The beacon that had started it all was shut down, its purpose fulfilled. But the bonds it had created would last for millennia. Humanity had answered the call, and the galaxy was forever changed.